Hello everyone. In today's class, we will learn some more new concepts of general about endocrine glands. So let's begin. Introduction to Physiology of Endocrine Glands, Part 2. As usual, it is based on the CBME curriculum. I'm Dr. Swati N. Pikare from Al-Amin Medical College. So we will be going as per the competencies. As you know, we had started with competency PY 8.2 last time. We are continuing with few more objectives today. So by the end of this class, the student should be able to understand the following concepts related to endocrinology, introduction to endocrinology. So the concepts are: define second messenger system, list the various second messenger systems, list the methods of assessing hormone levels by various methods, then describe the regulation of secretion of hormones. So these are our objectives for today's class. So let's begin with the second messenger system. Already we have seen a bit of it when we discussed about the mechanism of action in our previous class. So if we have to define the second messenger, the second messengers are non-protein intracellular signaling molecules released by the cell in response to signals from extracellular signaling molecules, that is hormones, the first messengers. So we have already seen this in the mechanism. We will see it much detail in the next coming slides. So basically they are signaling molecules which are released in response to the signals they receive from the hormones. So once these second messengers are produced, they don't stay there for long. They are going to be degenerated. But before that, their main function of second messengers are they're rapidly amplifying the signaling process and bring some change in the cellular mechanism. So the hormones are known as the first messengers, and these second messengers are produced in response to their hormone action, and the second messengers are the ones which are actually bringing out the cellular changes or biological response in each of the target cell. So as I was telling, second messengers do not stay for long. They are removed or degraded, uh, and the degradation of this terminates the cellular response. To the types of secondary messengers, though here it is classified, you need not actually know the classification per se, but you definitely have to know the different types of second messengers. So we know already the cyclic AMP, then the cyclic GMP. IP3 is ionositol triphosphate. So under hydrophilic category, but we don't really want you to remember all these categories. Cyclic AMP, cyclic GMP, IP3 stands for inositol triphosphate and calcium ion. So you can see that either they are very small ions or molecules, they are not protein in nature. Then the second category is about diacyl glycerol and also in short called as DAG, diacyl glycerol, phosphatidyl inositols. So this is a group which is most important, these two groups. The others are nitric oxide and hydrogen sulfide, H2S, and carbon monoxide, CO. They are used less often in the biological systems. So let's see a little details about each of these second messengers, beginning with the cyclic AMP. So we have seen this particular diagram last time when we discussed with the mechanism of action of hormones, peptide hormones specifically. Okay, so the peptide hormones were acting on surface receptors. Okay, so let's not go again into that. So once the hormone binds to the receptor, we saw that it is activation of the G protein. The G protein, activated G protein activates the adenyl cyclase, which in turn converts the ATP to cyclic AMP. So this cyclic AMP, which is produced here, okay, this is the second messenger, which is continuing this signaling pathway. Okay, it is carrying the band of from hormone. Now this is the signaling molecule, cyclic AMP. It further activates certain protein kinases, and based on that, there will be response in the cell. Okay, so this is how cyclic AMP acts as a second messenger. Next, coming to the example of cyclic GMP. Okay, cyclic GMP. So please don't get bothered about the elaborate diagrams here. They are very simple. There is a cell membrane, nitric oxide being just an gaseous form. It just comes in by diffusion and binds to nitric oxide synthase. Then, so ultimately, the hormone here, nitric oxide is acting like a hormone. Once it enters here, we have, just similar to adenyl cyclase, we have guanyl cyclase. Okay, so the guanyl cyclase converts GTP to cyclic GMP. So we had previously ATP to cyclic AMP. So we have GTP converted to cyclic GMP. Now cyclic GMP similarly causes activation of certain protein kinases and brings about the action based on the hormone, based on the target cell and other things. Okay, so as a second messenger, what we need to remember is it continues the signaling pathway and activates certain protein kinases to bring about the required action in the cell. Okay, so we completed cyclic AMP, cyclic GMP. Now we will just have an overview of both of them. That means there is some signal that is a hormone which is coming here and binding on the cell surface that activates the G protein and the cyclases. Maybe adenyl cyclase. If it is adenyl cyclase, ATP to cyclic AMP. If it is guanyl cyclase, GTP to cyclic GMP. So these two second messengers bring about the action, maybe ion opening, protein synthesis, whatever, through the protein kinases. Once the job is over, there are substances called phosphodiesterase. They will stop their action by converting them into, respectively, into 5-AMP and 5-GMP. Okay, that's how their biological action is terminated by the phosphodiesterases. Moving on to the other second messengers. So here again, we have a big diagram. Don't get overwhelmed. So there is you begin with a cell membrane. There is a surface receptor here also. Okay. So we begin with the binding of the hormone to the receptor. Okay. As usual, it activates. There is an inactive G protein here. It is activating the G protein. Okay. Activation always involves phosphorylation. Okay. So if there was a GDP here, it becomes GTP, that is phosphorylation. Activates the G protein. Okay. Now the main part comes over here where we have what is called the phospholipase. Okay. Phospholipase. What does it do? The phospholipase will convert PIP2, that is phosphoinositol diphosphate. Phosphoinositol diphosphate is getting phosphorylated and it converts it into IP3, inositol triphosphate, which acts as a second messenger. Okay, so the basic important thing is one, hormone binds to the receptor, activates the G protein, activates the phospholipase, which converts PIP2 to IP3 and another substance, that is DAG, diacylglycerol. Now, in this pathway, that is the phospholipase pathway, we call it. The two second messengers are, once again, I would like to repeat, they are IP3, inositol triphosphate, and DAG, diacylglycerol. Okay, they are going to activate the other protein kinases and bring about the cellular response. In addition, the IP3, okay, the IP3 causes the release of calcium. Okay, the calcium and the call module system also act as second messengers, and some cases they take up the role of a third messenger. Okay, as here. So calcium can be a second messenger or a third messenger. So here, because already this is produced and then it is coming, we are calling it a third messenger. Okay. So this is the phospholipase pathway where our second messengers are IP3 and DAG. Moving on to the last pathway. Again, I would like to say, please don't get overwhelmed with the diagrams. So this is the cell membrane. Okay. We have here two tyrosine kinases. Okay. So here you should remember that in the earlier cases, we had one receptor, then it was activating some other substance like the G protein or whatever. Here, what happens is it is a single entity. Okay, it has an extracellular part, it has a transmembrane part, and it also has an intracellular part. So this functions, does all the functions. Okay, so let's begin and just try to understand. So when you are drawing the diagram, please draw just a cell membrane. Then you draw a U-shaped structure at the top, which is the location for the hormone binding. Okay, so hormone binding. Then there is the transmembrane part straight. And intracellular, we have a domain, tyrosine kinase domain, and a tyrosine residue. Okay, so these are the parts. Now let's see how the things function. Okay, so if a hormone, remember this are individual separate here in the beginning. So this is a tyrosine kinase receptor. So normally the insulin is one of the classic example of how this functioning works. So let's say one hormone, example insulin, binds to this receptor location. Okay, receptor binding site. Once it binds, what happens is there is dimerization. Okay, that means they come together. You can see this part here. Okay, the first thing is the binding of the hormone to the receptor. Binding causes dimerization here. That is the dimerization. They come together. This dimerization brings about activation of the tyrosine kinase domain. Okay, so this activates. You can see all that is happening in just one single structure. That is the tyrosine kinase receptor only. Okay, so that is the activated enzyme domain. Now, once it activates, it causes phosphorylation, the next step. Okay, phosphorylation of the tyrosine residue. Now, just like we had protein kinases in the rest of them, here we have a phosphorylated domain, which is responsible for the rest of the signaling process occurring in the cell. Okay, so it will, other intracellular signal proteins are phosphorylated, and thus it triggers the intracellular signaling pathway. So this is in simple about the tyrosine kinases. We will revisit all this when we take up individual hormones related to this. So you have to remember this tyrosine kinase also as one of the pathways for signaling. Okay, they don't actually produce any specific second messengers. Coming to just trying to make a list of the second messengers and the hormones that are utilizing this. In simple way, I would like to say for cyclic AMP, already we told all peptide hormones. So all peptide hormones means remember all anterior pituitary hormones, ACTH, TSH, prolactin, in this way. And parathyroid hormone, antidiuretic hormone, all these are peptide hormones. They all work through cyclic AMP. Then through protein kinase activity, as I was giving you, typical example is the insulin and oxytocin. Next, calcium or phosphoinositols, that is IP3 and DAG. This is basically the catecholamines, if you remember. It's a good example to remember, the catecholamines, epinephrine and norepinephrine, then thyroid releasing hormone, TRH. Okay, that would suffice. For cyclic GMP, You can remember nitric oxide and atrial natriuretic hormone. Okay. So this becomes more easier and simpler to remember as we go into individual hormones. So moving to our next objective, that is methods of assessing hormone levels. The first and the oldest method was biological assay, where the effect of an hormone is evaluated. A typical example is the tibial assay. Tibia bone is there. You know the growth hormone coming from the anterior pituitary. It will have its effect on the bones. So tibial assay is done for finding out how good the hormone is working or not working. Okay, so this was a very old concept. The chemical assay, the recent ones, the chemical assay, this is possible if and once we know the chemical structure of the hormone. So there are several different types of chemical assays that are available. Let's see an example for a few of them. Okay, the fluorescence method, this is used for measuring or assessing catecholamines. Okay, fluorescence method for catecholamines. Gas liquid chromatography is used for steroid hormones. And radioactive isotopes are used for thyroid hormones. Okay, we are just taking some few examples here. The details, the principles, everything you will be learning in biochemistry related to the hormone assay. We are just knowing the names over here. Okay, so biological assay, chemical assay, these were the methods. Fluorescence method, gas liquid chromatography, radioactive isotopes. Let's see a little bit detail about the radioimmunoassay. Okay? The radioimmunoassay is used to measure all the peptide hormones, okay, protein or peptide hormones. So let's look into the principle, basically how it is done. It is not difficult. We can understand the principle in a simple way. Okay, so let's start with one step at a time. Okay, suppose we have an antibody. Okay, antibody is a binding protein. It is saturated with radio-labeled hormone. Look into this diagram. Okay, so this Y-shaped structure are the antibodies. Okay, they are the antibodies or they act like a binding protein. So that we have added radioactive hormone. Okay, radio-labeled hormone. So these are the radio-labeled hormones. Excess of it is added so that they are saturated. Okay, that means saturated means all the binding sites of the antibody are having the hormone has already attached. Okay, what is the next step? We add unlabeled hormone. Okay, so this is the same hormone. If this hormone is hormone glucagon, if I say, this would be radio-labeled glucagon. This is unlabeled glucagon. Okay, so we add this. Next, that is the next step. Once we add this, what will happen? There is competition. So this is the antibody or the binding protein, and to the antibody or the binding protein, there is a binding sites. Already it is saturated with radio-labeled, but there is a competition now from the unlabeled. So the unlabeled hormones, some of them will displace the radio-labeled hormones. There is a competition between radio-labeled and unlabeled hormone. Unlabeled hormone binds to the antibody and free radio-labeled hormones increases. So you can see that radio-labeled hormones are freely present. Okay, so some amount of radio-labeled is there, some free are there. So if we see a ratio of this free radio-labeled hormone proportion, if we see the proportion of radio-labeled to free, then we get an idea about how much hormone is actually there. Okay, so this is the basic principle. We are not going into the details of the radioimmunoassay. So this is how the radioimmunoassay is done. Next, a modified form of this radioimmunoassay is ELISA, that is enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay. Okay, so this is somewhat very similar to radioimmunoassay. Only thing, an enzyme is involved here. Okay, so ELISA is a plate-based assay technique designed for detecting and quantifying the peptides or proteins or the hormones for us here. Okay, so here the ELISA, the hormone is immobilized to a solid surface and then complexed with an antibody that is linked to an enzyme. So in general, if I have to just simplify and tell, here it is very similar to radioimmunoassay. Only thing, there is an enzyme that is involved here. You will learn more about this in detail in the biochemistry. So regulation of hormones, already we saw a bit of regulation of hormones in our last class. So just summing up, we saw only the hormonal control. Okay. So in the regulation of hormones, we have three different types of regulation. First one is the direct stimuli or humoral. Please don't get confused here with the hormonal. Humoral means here a substance. Okay, some intracellular substance. It may be an ion, it may be some nutrient, whatever, but it does not a hormone. Okay, humoral, the word is used. Okay, direct stimuli. I'll show you the examples in the next slide. The next type of regulation is the neural control. Okay, the neural control may be direct or via the autonomic nervous system. The third component is the hormonal control, where both short and long loop are there. So in the next slide, let's see the examples and understand what are each one of them. So coming to the first panel on the left side. Okay, so this is a parathyroid glands are shown here. Okay, so for simplicity, since we have not gone to individual organs, just remember parathyroid gland releases parathormone. And what is its function? Its function is to increase the calcium level in the blood. Okay, so that's its function. So let's say in the blood, if there is lowering of calcium, okay, whenever the calcium lowers, this parathormone is going, it is going to stimulate the decreased calcium levels is a stimulation for the parathyroid gland to release parathormone. Okay, and what does parathormone do? It will increase the calcium back to the normal level. Okay, so here the constituent that is regulated. Now, parathormone regulates calcium homeostasis. The calcium itself is a stimulant or inhibitor for the parathormone release. Okay, so this is called as direct or humoral control. Similarly, it is for glucose. Okay, you know, glucose, insulin is a hypoglycemic hormone. So there, the glucose itself is the stimulant. Whenever the glucose level is raised to a very high level, it will stimulate insulin release. Okay, so here humoral in general, we are all going to learn all this in detail with each specific hormone. Now you remember, with respect to regulation of hormone, one type of control is where the particular nutrient or ion which is regulated by that hormone that itself is adjusting the hormonal secretions. Okay, that is humoral. Next is the neural regulation. Neural regulation is either direct or by autonomic nervous system. Okay, so here you can see that in the autonomic nervous system, it arises, the autonomic nervous system consists of the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. Okay, so here it arises from the spinal cord. So those nerves are coming and ending over the adrenal medulla, and they either stimulate the release of the medullary hormones, that is epinephrine and norepinephrine, okay, to secrete catecholamines. This is the neural regulation. Okay, next moving on to the hormonal regulation. This we had seen last time itself. What is it? Let's understand. We have a thyroid gland which is releasing thyroid hormone. Okay, we will take only one example of thyroid, not all the structures. So thyroid gland is releasing thyroid hormone. So if it has to release that, it is stimulated by the anterior pituitary hormone, that is TSH. Okay, so anterior pituitary TSH is stimulating the thyroid. So if TSH has to be stimulated, what is there? It is the hypothalamus releasing thyroxine releasing hormone. Okay, so TRH, then TSH, then thyroid producing. So like this, it is there. Let's just see a little bit in detail here. Okay. So we want to talk about the long loop. Hypothalamus produces the releasing hormone. That's on anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary produces the tropic hormone. For us in this example, hypothalamus is producing TRH, anterior pituitary is producing TSH, whereas that tropic hormone acts on target organ to release thyroid hormone, that is T3, T4. Okay. Now, once T3, T4 is released, see this on the left panel, which is more easy. This is going to inhibit the TSH. When the thyroid hormone levels increases, they are going to inhibit the TSH release. Okay. Or they can also inhibit the release of TRH at the hypothalamus. If T3, T4 is inhibiting the release on hypothalamus, this we call it as a long loop feedback mechanism. Okay. And if T3, T4 is inhibiting TSH, then we call it as short loop mechanism. Whereas if TSH, suppose, is inhibiting its own anterior pituitary, then it is called ultra short feedback mechanism. So in general, all these mechanisms are negative feedback mechanisms, but based on how far the responses, the negative feedback is, they are named as long feedback mechanism or short loop feedback mechanism or ultra short feedback mechanism. So that was about the regulation part. You have a humoral, direct neural regulation, and also hormonal regulation by long loop, short loop, and ultra short loop. Now we will end this introduction to endocrinology by giving a small overview of how we have to read each of the particular hormones. Okay. So for every hormone, it will become very simple and easy if you can know what is the chemical nature of the hormone. Next, hormone synthesis, storage, release, and transport. Okay. Then mechanism of action, how it is working. Now, most of the things we know in general, so it becomes very easy when we go to the individual hormones. Next, we will see what are the feedback relationships, how it is working, and the biorhythm, if there is any. The most important part would be the physiological actions and functions. Lastly, applied aspect, what happens if there is hypo or hypersecretion of each of these hormones. So if we understand every hormone under this, and it will be very beneficial if you can make a very big chart out of this in this manner for every hormone. So we can just read the entire endocrinology by just looking into that particular chart. So lastly, one more thing which is going to help you in understanding endocrinology is you have to remember that in general, hormones have a function in 4 areas. What are those 4 areas? Every hormone is doing one or the other function under these 4 areas. Okay. One is maintaining internal environment. Okay. It is maintaining calcium level. It is maintaining glucose level, or it may be maintaining several other things. Okay, it is maintaining temperature. Next, it is doing something about energy production, utilization, and storage. Or it is doing something about growth and development. Lastly, it is related to reproduction. So whichever hormone we are going to elaborately learn, please remember their functions will come into one of these 4 categories. And if we just simply try to keep in mind these things, it will be very easy, because as we go on learning more and more hormones in the further, sometimes there is a confusion between the functions and actions and so many things. Okay, this broad overview to have will be very useful. Okay, so this is all for today's class. we complete the introduction to general endocrinology. Okay, so what we have completed today, we have defined the second messenger system. We have listed out the various second messengers, cyclic AMP, cyclic GMP, IP3, DAG, calcium, etc. Then we have listed the methods of assay of hormone levels in brief. Describe the regulation of secretion of hormones, the 3 different types of regulation, and few general principles of endocrinology we have completed. Kindly do the with the diagrams. The diagrams are the ones which will help you recall anything very easily. So that's completes our general endocrinology. Next, we will be dealing with individual hormones. Thank you.